The last time we talked, I had mentioned how Richard Byrd wrote in his flight log about seeing swastikas on the UFOs that approached his plane. In particular, he wrote in his diary or in his flight log, off our port and starboard wings are a strange type of aircraft. They are closing rapidly alongside. They are disc-shaped and have a radiant quality to them. They are close enough now to see the markings on them. It is a type of swastika. This is fantastic. Where are we? And he also wrote that the men were blonde and spoke with a slight Nordic or Germanic accent. And of course, this happened in 1947, 2 years after World War II. So my question is, like, who were these people? Were they like some sort of Aryan Nazis in UFOs or what?
First of all, the idea what you considering World War II being over in 47 is incorrect. Yes, there's been since made some agreements, more or less decades later, but at this time there was the war going on. You could perhaps term it a European war. Yes, as this was over at this particular point in time, is the fighting occurring in the Pacific, and as you're obviously aware of now, also in the Arctic. Now, obviously, there were peoples from the vessels region. Yes, there are certain ideas of what's considering disclosure being also tied in with certain regions. Also, something we cannot go off on tangents here from too far, as also ties in with inner reptilian politics, and we're also observing how you're interacting and how the West is interacting with new information, and not just we are providing it, also others. There's a lot of judgment still happening to a certain degree, also tying in still with the rampant energy we introduced in our short introduction speaking here, yes, on a much larger scale. Now, but being more detailed in your particular questioning, yes, there are certain peoples inside your planet that have been there not just since the Atlantis downfall, but even earlier, of a certain genetic strain, this related to perhaps what you consider Nordic or Germanic, but there are many others, yes, especially your so-called Native American, so-called, yes. Many of them have not ventured under there, many have been under there since 100,000 years, even to some degree, yes. And the pattern region, of course, also provide a large entrance point for many to venture there. However, the more recent past, not just the Viking idea who traveled towards the north, but if you ask your particular just the Nordic strait, but particularly the vessels region, who, by the way, is also to a large part serving for a reason why we chose the vessel to communicate through. So it's a resonance with this particular grouping that found refuge right there at this particular point in time, or somewhat earlier, as there have been settlements since the 30s in the so-called, from the vessel's mind, the new Schwabenland region. We believe it's a word from the vessel's own language. So the idea simply it's located in your so-called Queen Maud's Land region in the Norwegian sector of the Antarctic range. However, this was simply beginning when there was original settlements. There's, however, was a larger area, much more to the center of us. Yes, where there was an agreement reached with indigenous people and certain refugees from the Western region who decided to settle there, fleeing troopings from your so-called allied factions. Before there was a certain agreement reached later on, that led to at least something like an armistice. Similar, however, like your Cold War, not necessarily a peaceful friendship, but simply an armistice. Your so-called Cold War was no real Cold War either. It was more fake and on the surface than you might imagine. However, there is still a Cold War between those factions you're considering Axis or allies, which to a certain degree ties in also with our conflict with the Airy-Fairy Federation. However, it's not like one region is serving the others, or one part of the earth is serving the one up in the sky, so to speak, as above, so below. It's true, but not literally in this case, like a proxy war, perhaps. It's more your certain energies you're transmuting down there, or not transmuting, for that matter. It's also playing out in a different way out here, or has been playing out in the Rhine War, for example, as you remember, there's no timing, or on the Pleiades, or on Lyra, run serious many other systems. Same energies, same discussions about certain idea of rulership of the universe, your Milky Way, your solar system, where particular the vessel's Richard group has collaborated with us, and with us we're referring to entire empire, and of course also to a certain degree your own planet. On your planet there are various factions of religious and political natures that are fighting over rulership of your planet, very often covert, as in this example. Yes? Now, as for the insignia, obviously the swastika, as you're calling such as much older, this particular political, religious, spiritual, occult, whatever group you want to call it, from the vessel's region adventurers there. As the symbol has been used in various cultures for many millennia, even dating back to the Atlantis and Lemurian continents, by many various cultures. It was simply rediscovered by certain secret societies about 100 years ago, linking it to the particular numeric strait. It's linked to many ancient cultures, particularly Asia, obviously, yes, but also by others you might never think of, such as the Native American, African, or various ancient European or even Easter Island cultures. Or now, a certain idea, of course, have been brought forward to those secret societies. Again, as we've explained previously, they made contact with some of the airy fairies, some people that want to provide what you consider development aid to people on Earth, and since there's general pressure on the vessel's region after your so-called First World War, as you're calling such, you're considering world wars, but really those were just wars, at least the first one to a certain degree, on a region you consider the civilized world, but many other peoples you're considering civilized were directly involved, but not get off tangents here. Their ideas, those society meant contacts, youth development aid to suppressed people in need of simply technological updates. Yes, which can happen to the idea of developing something like a space program. This was our society and was not linked to us. It was more linked to a certain grouping in the Aldebaran system. What you consider Nordic it is in your ufology. They're not all necessarily what you consider Nordic on yours, but that's what you're using in your ufology literature for those groupings. They're directly linked to those peoples that you're very commonly associated with the Pleiades, but there are many other groupings of Pleiades of various different races, species. There's just something you're having in your modern ufology you're terming such. And their culture is different than the ones on the Pleiades, for example. They're more technologically oriented. Now, however, those groupings supplied sufficient technology for similar means, such as we are speaking to the vessel right now, particularly to one person has become popular by now in your researching field of exopolitics, the Maria person, who to a certain degree was from the southern region near where vessel seated, but also from further away, so to speak. But this remains, again, depends how far you're reacting to the information disclosed previously, will depend how far information will come out. Again, focus more on your world and how you're transmuting the energies that are cropping out the pimples right now, and we will see what will be supplied later on, depending how you're reacting or if you're completely using it. No offense, but those types of information have managed to blow entire planet up when certain informations came to the surface. You're just touching the very smooth surface of a large iceberg on the ground. So it's not anything dangerous we are sharing right here. Just as a warning what might come up further down the line if you're reaching or as you're calling is falling down the rabbit hole, correct? Now, those particular vessels flying there were, from what we are observing, from the vessel's region, and they had found refuge there, being linked to those secret societies who later on, after was something like a warlike scenario, considering your Second World War, which was really just a continuation of the first, yes, the peaceful ones that wanted to be evacuated left the solar system from what we're observing, except those that went on to give development aid to other countries that are either axis or allied or unaffiliated or whatever, because their main objective was what you're considering, again, development aid for people in need, and not necessarily giving war rate. Yes? So, however, for the Empire was obviously not a concern. The Empire concern was conquest. Yeah, fair is one is too, really, but they're sugarcoating it, they're doing it covertly, sort of primary rather. So this was not their method. Then members from the Empire made contact with the same groupings and supplied more technology. It was more useful for warlike scenarios. But for some reason, the people in the Western region, particularly the black-coated SS, as you're calling such, yes, there were certain contexts did for some reason not manage to put what you now in your modern Star Wars, for example, your entire science fiction industry, movie industry, or whatever, terming laser weapons, didn't mount them correctly on the what you're considering UFOs. They managed to do this later on, but for some reason, they were incapable of applying this in timing. Their loss, not ours. Their idea was then there was also aiding not from the Empire, also from some from the inside the Earth. Not necessarily they want to aid the war effort in fending off an allied attack, yes, on our region or on the Axis region. They're simply defending their own territory from any intruder. Of course, there was also the diplomatic idea of them finding refuge there in this particular region where they knew they could take refuge to begin with, because any attack would not be permitted, neither their own weaponry inside the planet. Yes, in the Antarctic region, that was acceptable, and to this very day, there is still a base, has been termed as New Berlin, which has nothing to do with the city in or close to the vessel where it's sitting right now. It is not a city, it's a base that's not very big, it's somewhat small, it's not necessarily affiliated with the political grouping that founded it. It's much older, centuries older. It was simply repopulated from some refugees who decided to settle there, and some of them affiliated with the grouping of us, who took them under our wing, so to speak, but the vast majority at the time left and totally vacated the planet and joined forces with the Empire to a certain degree, particularly the Moon, but that was just a station. We're never aware. By now in your entertainment industry, there's quite a comedy about this idea, such as the questioning from one of your movies that were finding the vessel's mind, are there Nazis on the Moon? Now, we're aware from the Western mind that there is a certain humorous idea to this. It's not quite far off. Perhaps other ideas portrayed in certain movie ideas, but we're aware there are certain people you're considering also from the Allied regions, not just whistleblowers, and we're perhaps aware from the American region, and I've spoken about this recently, but also from the Soviet Empire. It has been affiliated with us to a certain degree, where also people have stepped forward now and shared some information that you might not be aware of to the same degree about their own research and the affiliations of those groupings from the Western region with the Empire and their offshoots. It's much further what some might imagine. Also, this ties in with the certain groupings that have tried to establish a quarantine around the solar system to not just keep those groupings from the Western region, but us entirely trapped in. However, there's also the idea that now we're going with the flow, yes? Because now certainly tides have shifted, and now we're shifting over to the light. So we want to re-emphasize here what we have been emphasizing since years in your own timing, since we started cooperating with the vessel. Also, originally the idea of simply releasing the book, not necessarily speaking like we're doing it right here now, but what we have brought forward since the beginning was the idea we're simply reaching a point where we're realizing the benefits of both sides, and simply other groupings that are affiliated with us, certainly many in the Empire, that are affiliated with those people from the Western region among them, otherwise we would not be talking to this hairless monkey right here, right now. We wouldn't care. We have no certain affiliations with anybody who doesn't serve us. Serves the self, serves to others, one same thing, right? So, the idea is simply we're reaching a threshold, and those that are actually judging us to a certain degree thinking, now those reptiles are plain nice. Incorrect. Whoever spraying this idea forward needs to look at their own darkness and perhaps integrate them, and then they can reach forward and grab our claw as we're aware you're shaking hands in the reindeer when you're reaching agreement, and we are hoping and we are still seeing this come forward. We will reach agreement. we will find a common ground. It is very much tied into this conflict right there you're considering World War II. Again, decades after this idea that you're considering ending, yes, there was reached a certain agreement like an armistice, yes, also tied into a large agreement with the grouping that has been backed by the Very Federation, your so-called United Nations, and those powers behind it. Now, again, there are certain upheavals in your planet, in your so-called awakening community, your so-called hippie, yes, movements in the 60s also plays a certain role with this whole agreement, their influences on your planet, also the coming down of the Iron Curtain, etc. But we're aware from your current standpoint, it's all past. However, getting back to the present day, you're still having the rebellious pimp ideas currently cropping up, and you might be familiar with certain groupings now that we have turned political previously, aren't necessarily directly related to the groupings of the Western region, but they're very shyly rich and forward in a certain energy is linking there. Now, depends correctly how you're transmuting this, if you're coming forward this is or not. You're in the option that next of your years, yes, 2019, again, we're just doing years because you are dividing time in years, but we're not. So again, it can happen anytime, but from where we are receiving, depends how you're transmuting the pimpling, the pimple and the bearing private rampage year, which are previously this year, will determine what happens then following. The idea currently is that there will be a link up of political and religious terrorism and groupings you would deem opposite might join forces and then stand up, and then what might happen would be a all-out rebellion, which could lead either to what you consider freedom or a complete catastrophe. This, however, either will likely lead to further conflict between our species. So it's unlikely we will come down and hug each other and everything will be hunky-dory. This will likely lead to further conflict between our species. We still don't know how this can be transmuted in any way. What we can share, however, is this relates to the very conflict has led to the downfall of Atlantis region to a certain degree and the Lemurian region on your planet previously, the wars in Orion, the wars on Sirius and the Pleiades, many are rich in the sky. Many of our groupings up here are listening in now, including Merkel, of course, pissed off as always, yes, as you might be big up from RNG, also the Vortex group as well as us, and many others from the Empire. We're observing not just your collectives that you're speaking to. We're observing the West and everything it interacts with. And all these interactions our society, our teachings, our lessons, people reading our book, how they're picking our energy and we're relying upon this. How we bring them forward new information to forward you're considering future. Thus far, we're aware we went further than your original idea of just towards a single national or perhaps grouping affiliations of the certain affiliations of signature of those particular vessels that are perhaps of a houndaboo or frill type nature from the Western region, or they've developed ships much further by now that look much different. So you would unlikely see those ships in your sky right now, just as an informative measure right here. We can now go over to the Lisa person's questioning, which she brought forward in towards the cloud again here, unless the Ryan person has a further follow-up on this larger elaboration of us, which was very necessary at this point in time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for all that information. Yeah, one more quick question before we go on. You had talked about the swastika, and recently I was researching, trying to find out the origin of this. A popular theory is that it originated in ancient Iran about 3,200 years ago when it represented a kind of star map centered on the brightest star in the Draconis system, Zeta Draconis, which they also apparently believed was the North Star. And in your book with David, you state that the Empire was, at least somehow affiliated with the Nazis, which you also just now talked about. So I hope I'm not treading on inter-reptilian politics, but would it be correct to assume that the Nazi symbol of the swastika was somehow referencing the Draconis system?
This is very far-fetched. Of course, your reptilian politics, as we already mentioned, this right here now, and there are also many from your own planetary realms that are coming from this particular information, not just from the West's own region. They have released this information many decades ago, but we're aware certain years ago there are also groupings from all over the planet that will bring their testimony forward, including some ancient testimony. Not just related to the symbol, obviously, but yes, the symbol is much older and not necessarily just affiliated with the Empire, but much more with your Milky Way galaxy in general. And there are various groupings out there, and obviously it's much older. Again, refers to earlier civilizations even than your Atlantis. Even certain regions in the Hyperborean, your so-called northern regions that were once the equator before a pole shift, used a similar symbol. Not exactly the same symbol your political occult grouping, considering Nazi or particular the occult part, necessarily political party, but rather groupings within the occult militaristic branch of the SS, yes, which to our knowledge is no longer functioning in the same fashion as some have mentioned such, but something very similar, still very active. So you could consider this perhaps a follow-up, yes? It's still active. This grouping has reinvented, or rather found the symbol, and then turned into what you consider the crooked cross, yes? If there's a correct translation to your English language, a crooked cross. But the real idea of any form of swastika, or perhaps any form of sun wheel, exists in all culture all over the planet since much longer, and it refers to the Milky Way in general, not particular to the region in the terracotta system.
So could you just clarify like why the Nazis in particular loved this symbol so much and decided to use it to represent their group?
They realized its power. There are different ideas of using different symbols from what we are reading. Yes, in your so-called Akash. A Thor's hammer, for example. Yes, from your Northern mythology. However, obviously not nearly in its hypnotic idea. And thirdly, it's simply a symbol that has been ingrained in your genetics since a long time in various forms. Not just in the crooked cross idea, the black sun would be another example. The Russians have their own, yes. Obviously various Asians in particular who kept the knowledge intact, both the swastika and the Zauvastika, which both are related to the same concept. Yes, sometimes been termed they are the opposite, but really they're the same idea. It's like the yin and yang symbol. They're both representing the same concept of the Wu Wei idea, yes, of the unmovable mover standing in the center point with the with the arms around the axis, for example. If you would take a simple cross and spin it very quickly, yes, you get the idea. If you're spinning a cross very quickly, then it would start looking similarly due to the rotation idea. Again, symbolizing the rotation because the same way you fashion your Milky Way rotates due to the gravitational pull, it pulls the planetary and stellar bodies in a certain format that makes them appear as being on arms, the arms of the so-called Milky Way, symbolizing the idea of the arms of the various sun wheels. Again, not just the swastika, and it's just being one representation that became very popular, particularly in the Asian region, and it was also obviously particularly popular in the northern region of your European continent, from which then those particular occult political groupings picked it up. Not the political party you're now familiar with, the National Socialistic, yes, not necessarily having something to do with particularly the Western region or the political idea of socialism, much more with the occult roots of secret societies such as the Thule or the Order of the Black Sun, which later operated through the SS. But if a different political party would have taken power, they would have been just as infiltrated and taken over by the same groupings. It's not about the public representation. Yes.
I see. Okay.
Yes, to that degree. We're aware it ties in also to the politics of your own planet. The Empire has also been very active with certain groups in the Soviet Empire, where the airy ferries established it, but we took it over. Yes. Similarly, certain airy ferries have been contact in the so-called 20s of your last century, with certain occult groupings from the vessel's region, which can kickstart something that we could build upon. That's simply how the Emperor's functioned. Again, it's not like we're moving over to the light side now because we're being good boys now. We realize that dark is evil. Not like this. We're simply taking something and then doing something around it. With the same as the Catholic Church. Yes? Probably a prime example. And even a lot of so-called unawakened sheep, as you're calling other hairless monkeys of yours, that are even more unaware than you are, have even come aware of that the Catholic Church is not necessarily a representation of the person known as Jesus Christ, correct?
I see.
The same way the Empire has operated since millennia, even your modern ufology, by the so-called UFO cults, yes, have been infiltrated and taken over. The only reason we're sharing this public right now is because it's becoming common knowledge by now anyway. And we've reached a further stage where the ufology ideas reached a state where something like disclosure becomes possible. We do not support what you consider full disclosure, however, but certain police rules are also willing by the Empire. So everybody currently is not just focused on centralization and globalization, as you're calling this, yes, but also disclosure. We're just having different ideas how we bring this about, but it's very likely those two things are going to happen on your planet pretty soon, as far as they haven't happened already anyway, yes. Just reaching public what we consider mainstream further and further, because both fractions that are seemingly opposed to each other out here are reaching further agreement on this matter. The idea, yes, we are all going to come down, dancing to the very, very hunky-dory. This is unlike the SDRS being some of those ideas being brought forward in your contact scenarios, as we're aware from the vessel. Yes, again, we're observing what the vessel observes. We want to put a halt to there. This would be something like in your V movie scenario if it happened right now. This is a friendly warning, yes. Unlikely to happen at all, though. Otherwise, we wouldn't share this right here. We're not a fifth column after all. We are just going our own way. Now, the idea simply being, we're reaching agreement, and when you're transmuting, if you're transmuting the energies we shared previously, then this becomes an option. But again, in your current year, you still have to go to the pimp idea, and then we'll see what happens with the riches and political conflicts that might lead to the further conflict with the Empire, and also the further disclosure with the Empire, and it then greatly depends how you're transmuting those energies. But this will no longer be just an issue of your so-called awakened community. Other people might think, oh, the war in Syria is cropping up again, or, oh, there's further conflict in the North Korean peninsula, something covert that will be used for the proxy war, how the collective will tie into this. But no longer will we build an idea of simple groupings such as this listening to reptiles from a dimension speaks for a hairless monkey. Not everybody needs to come across this information in this fashion. It's very unimportant. Important is how you transmit the energy. Again, we're using energies in terms of year reading because you are using years to divide your time. For us, it's just two frequency ranges. We are saying are possible for you, and you will likely live through in those fragments you're calling years. It all depends greatly how you will transmute and create those energies will crop up in the meantime. Again, collectively, it's just a mirror of individually. Look at your own darkness and shadows, yes? Wherever they are, bring them to the light, so to speak, and we will do the same, and perhaps we can be in the middle. It's unlikely now everything hunky-dory. It's just on the frequency, but it's still quite possible that we will reach an agreement. At least currently it's very unlikely, and we will trigger another world war and blow up your planet. That's very unlikely. Just as complete world peace is very unlikely right now. We're somewhere in between still, even from future scenarios. So everybody who's waiting for doom and gloom is unlikely. Anybody who's waiting for everybody suddenly realizing we're all one and falling into each other's arms and hugging is also very unlikely. But your parents very aware of this unless you're walking around with closed eye on your planet. Yes?
Yes, definitely. Well, I hope my planet doesn't get blown up, at least not in my lifetime. But anyway, yeah, thanks for answering all my questions today. And the movie you mentioned about Nazis on the moon is called Iron Sky. And for anybody listening, it's definitely a hilarious movie. It's even more hilarious now that I know that it's more or less true. But anyway, I don't have any questions about that topic. So thank you, class. Thanks for talking to me today. I appreciate it.
Yes, you're very welcome. Your sharing your information is important for the collective entirely, not just for you. We're using you to bring up an important topic, and we also used you to draw you in to ask us the correct question. So it's mutual interest right here. Much further to come up about this in the so-called future, but many of this is still up for diplomatic negotiations.
I see.